Hi, welcome and Happy New Year. I'm Tobey Crockett, PhD, and this is Doc Crockett's Metaphysical Medicine Show and Podcast. It's the very first one. We'll see how it goes. All right. So today's topic is burning bowl, release, and renew. Lots of times when it's the new year, you may attend or hear of attending a ceremony called a burning bowl, where you get to release stuff that you don't want to bring with you into the next year. And then also you ask for, subsequent to that, the things you do want to bring in to the new year. So let's begin. So first of all, one of the things I'm going to do here is explain what is ceremony and how is that working. So this episode might be a little bit longer than some of them. I don't know. We'll just see how it all plays out. And I'm going to have to be reading from my notes. So in the future, I'll have an improved setup, but for now, this is what it is. All right. So first of all, I always like to look at what is the etymology for the words that we're looking at, because it really tells us a lot. So the word ceremony was introduced in the late 14th century, there we go, from the Old French cérémonie, directly from Latin ceremonia, meaning holiness, sacredness, awe. Reverent rite, sacred ceremony. It's an obscure word, possibly with an Etruscan origin or a reference to the Etruscan pontiffs at Carre near Rome. And so the Etruscan word for ceremony, meaning pertaining to Carre, reflects the Etruscan fascination with divination and prophecy. You know, in the future, we will pick up this thread about the Etruscans because it has a lot to do with Gaia and the temple at Apollo and quite a number of things, but we'll get there in the future. So anyway, this word was introduced, we're back to the late 14th century, into English by John Wycliffe, who was an English scholastic philosopher, theologian, reformer, and professor at Oxford. He was an influential dissident within the Roman Catholic priesthood of the 14th century, and he advocated translating the Bible into the vernacular, so that is the common speech, and questioned the very existence of Roman Catholic standards, veneration of the saints, sacraments and masses, transubstantiation, monasticism, and even the papacy itself. So here we're getting like the beginning of wanting to bring the church more closely into the intimate realm of ordinary life. And in this regard, he introduces the word ceremony. So we're going to talk about how to construct this burning bowl ceremony, and that's why we're looking at what on earth is a ceremony to begin with. But, one thing you might ask yourself in reflecting on this is, what ceremonies have you attended in the past? The kinds of things you might think of would be like a graduation ceremony or a wedding, a funeral, memorial. Those are kind of the most typical ceremonies for people, but you may have attended more elaborate, unusual ones. And when I ask these open-ended questions, probably in the future, we'll use this as a format where if you were in a group or a circle of people, you could pause and everyone could go around the circle and answer this question. So, and then you would resume the video. So I think that's something that I may try to do, and we'll see how that works out. These lectures are all based on about 120 lectures that I offered over a 2.5, 3-year period in Morro Bay, California at the Coalesce bookstore. And we met weekly, a circle of mostly women, but not only, men certainly did attend as well. And so we would do this talking stick style, meaning no interruption, no crosstalk, no advice giving, no let me tell you what I think about what you just said, none of that. So sacred, attentive listening and creating caring space to share with one another. And so in this context, I ask these questions and each person would answer the question if that was what they wanted to do. And then the next person would go and I would wrap that up. I would also answer the question. So I'm not going to tell you about all the different ceremonies I've attended right now because that's a really long list. Anyway, so we'll continue with this examination. So, but basically, A ceremony is an energetic or spiritual occasion, and it's often done like at a propitious or a specified kind of a time to mark a special occasion or transition from one state to another, like being single to being married or being um, a non-initiate into someone who's been initiated. And actually, we will discuss initiation in the next talk because it's the perfect thing to do to start the new year. We are initiating a new year. What does that mean? So we'll look at that. So a ceremony invites spiritual intervention from beyond the visible physical world. It is a metaphysical ritual that brings us in touch with intangible, ineffable realities beyond the daily, mundane world. We'll talk about cosmologies as well. So ceremonies are used for blessings and healings, and especially useful in weaving the fabric of meaning into our lives, allowing us to bond with one another in community and with the transcendental, transpersonal forces of creation and the universe. So it's a very ancient human activity, at least 100,000 years old, if not older, with archaeological evidence in burial sites, pottery objects, and decoration. So there are absolutely energetic aspects as well as mechanical aspects to creating a ceremony or ritual. So the timing here, we're looking at New Year's, but widely defined. What is New Year? So this is generally speaking a lunar calendar event. The way the calendar has become what it is for us today, more separated from the solar, lunar, natural world, is a topic that will come up in the future. But the kinds of timing that we might look at for ceremonies would be also birthdays or age-related events, like, as I said, an initiation into a new phase of life. Or it could be lunar and astronomical events, such as the solstice. We just had the winter solstice. Equinoxes, we will have the spring equinox in March, and I'll discuss those functions of solstices and equinoxes another time. New moon, full moon, and then, also we mark losses in this way. Death, pregnancies, either come to term or not, relationship related events, departures, leaving a home, starting a home, graduation, efforts to remove obstacles, for instance. Like if there's something that you want to achieve and you want to make sure it goes well, you might conduct a ceremony to invite the favorable aspects. Also, you might celebrate the removal. For instance, a divorce may be an occasion for celebration for some. Oh, there's Orion behind me. Anyway, a burning bowl ceremony in particular is used to let go of the past. So it may be a year's worth of a past, a lifetime's worth of regret, any losses, a divorce, as I said, those kinds of things. A burning bowl ceremony is a way of burning off and releasing negativities, which is also an act of protection and clearing. So we saw on other discussions, the Celtic cross-quarter holidays are all fire ceremonies. The cross-quarter holidays are based on the Celtic cosmology of a wheel of the year, so that the year is a wheel, and it's a beautiful metaphor, and it is marked first by the main quarter events of the solstices and the equinoxes, and then if you were making like a little circle with diagonals in it, the cross-quarter holidays would then be like Imbolc on February 2nd, May Day, these Samhain or Halloween, those are cross-quarter holidays, and they're generally speaking started out as, in our culture in America, as Celtic. It's a Celtic inheritance brought over by frequently the Scots-Irish to the southeastern part of the United States, for instance. That's where some of my people originally came from back in the day, as well as Cherokee, etc. Anyway, for our purposes here, we're looking at the notion of how important is a fire ceremony. What is a fire ceremony offering us, and that transition of releasing that energy? So there's a lot of release and renewal in a spiritual calendar. And as I said, these are at least 8 fires. And let me also say that a sacred fire is not just any old fire. Like, you can't use a barbecue. You can't set up a sacred fire and then use it to barbecue your dinner. That like violates the sanctity of it. This is a kind of a contract that you're making with other forces that are perhaps not the immediately visible forces in our world, but that we nonetheless feel and are aware that they are there. So in opening and closing the ceremony, we're making a commitment for a special sanctified space, and we need to retain that respect for this fire that we've created just for this special occasion. It can be a very simple fire. It doesn't have to be super hyper elaborate. What your intention is tremendously important in all of that. So you don't mix your metaphysical and mundane fires. So let's just start with the various mechanical elements of a ceremony. All ceremonies have participants, ingredients, some kind of fire and container for that, and protocols. And so as far as the participants go, the people should be clean. They should be smudged and prepared to be in a sacred space. You bring your purest, cleanest, most ready to negotiate with the serious forces of the universe. And you don't just show up like you just fell out of bed for that. So you have to, you offer your respect for what is going on here. You realize that all of these things are a reflection of, you're almost like you could see it as you were almost speaking to yourself. So you're really speaking to your best self when you enter ceremony. This is what you are trying to bring forward, and that you are then going to refine in this process of ceremonial release and invitation and invocation, all of which will be explained further. So in some instances, that there's absolutely during the ceremony, unless it's specified as part of the ceremony, no eating, no drinking, no rude behavior. Women are frequently asked to wear skirts. This has to do not with enforcing a heteronormative convention. It has to do with inviting the circulation of energy from the core of the earth up the channel that women already have in the center of their bodies. Men should be so lucky that they can do that so directly. And so by not wearing pants, women are facilitating that flow of energy. It creates a bell shape that concentrates the forces up into the center of the body. There should be modesty. This is not a show-off occasion. No tube tops, spaghetti straps. This is often specified, and if it's not actually specified, it's expected and implied. This is not the kind of occasion to show off all your physical assets. This is an occasion to come with a sense of what's appropriate to a deep negotiation with your very best self. Of course, your best self may be sex positive. This is just not relevant to this particular thing, but you want to avoid gossip and crosstalk, distractions, and the person who leads the ceremony, it takes a lot of concentration and effort for them to do what they're doing. So it's really appropriate for you to help them and assist them in that process of gathering the energy, and not be distracting within that So we discussed there's a fire in a container. This can be a really mundane container. This could be a grill, but you're using it in a sacred way. Sometimes people have like a big metal bowl. An estate sale is a great place to find these kinds of objects inexpensively, or a thrift store, something that you can is heavy duty and that you'll use in this way. You might have smudging tools. Smudging is something that, for instance, is done frequently in Native American ceremonies, but certainly not only. This is where you use the smoke of, say, for instance, burning sage to clear the negativities and all that mundane stuff that we are arriving with. We then essentially are peeling off those layers as we go into ceremony. That's part of why the experience of being in ceremony feels so awesome on the other side. You have truly let go of all of these things that have lashed onto you in the course of your ordinary life. You're releasing that and letting that go. So the kinds of fires there might be, there's a lot of different fires that you can build. There can be a wood fire, in which instance you should not use any treated or milled wood because it releases gases. You can have a charcoal fire, a beeswax-based fire. In the Mayan tradition, they have just wonderful ways of making smokeless fires. And there are all different kinds of fires that you can be taught how to do this if you find the right kind of teacher. And my goal would be, in the course of all of these discussions, that somewhere along the line, fairly soon, you begin to understand what would make a qualified teacher. There are a lot of people who, get lost along the way. Let's not do that. Let's try to be right on the path and go where we want to go. So, there can be a fire pot or a ceramic bowl. You could use a big terracotta saucer, like something that you could get at Home Depot, like some kind of 12-inch saucer that can be used quite well. Of course, you always have to be mindful of safety. Do not do this indoors unless you're just using a candle. I mean, a candle safe indoors, but any kind of substantive fire, please don't do that indoors. Use common sense. And along those lines, you should have some water or sand available so that if you need to put that fire out quickly, you're able to do that. You should, especially in the case where you have a larger fire with a lot of people, like 8 or more people, you should have someone standing by who's expressly there to guard the fire and who has some kind of firekeeper experience. Firekeeper is a specific kind of a term, usually within a Native American context, but other people who have a lot of knowledge of this kind of thing are, for instance, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. There are plenty of people with woodcraft or who know how to camp. All of these are people who, generally speaking, have a good sense of fire safety and can be a good ally to help the leader of, if you're the person who's wanting to host a burning bowl ceremony, it's a good idea to have one of these kinds of people there with you so that everyone will be well cared for. And there's also you have to have the understanding that the fire that you're creating is itself also an energetic being. You will hear the discussion of grandfather fire and what grandfather fire can teach you. And there's many, many, many teachings there, far more than I know. I only know a little bit, but there are some people who know a lot, and there's a lot to know. I would like to know more in the future. It's something I will continue to develop. So, and then you have ingredients. What would be good fire materials? So like dried flowers, incense that you can crumble, resins like frankincense, sandalwood. There are many, many special herbs and resins from all around the world. They smell incredible. It's so wonderful. Beeswax is a terrific way to gently keep a little fire going, like with a pure beeswax candle. And within the Mayan tradition, you might use additional fire materials like honey, cocoa, sugar, various herbs and spices. It's all very specified how you do this. You can use dried cedar, fir, F-I-R, fir, pine, sage, tobacco, sweetgrass. Some of these are the 4 sacred herbs. That'll be a whole discussion of its own at some point. And then and what you should understand is that all of those things are not only ingredients to encourage the fire, but they are also food for the spirit world. So tobacco, for instance, carries our prayers to Creator, and there's a special story about that. So you would also have your prayers perhaps written out on a piece of paper. I like to use joss paper from the Chinese tradition. Sometimes if you're fortunate enough to have a Chinatown near where you are, you can get these great pieces of square pieces of paper with gold leaf on them, and that's like paper money for the spirit world, but it's a great thing to write these wishes on, what you want to bring in. And then we have the concept of the protocol, as I mentioned. So that's the 4th element of the mechanics of designing the ceremony. And for those of you who know about coding at all, you could think of some of the things that I'm going to say right now as almost like the opening and closing of HTML commands. So when you're writing code like that, you open a command or a instruction, and you have to close it at the opposite end. So if you say open a door, then at the very bottom you have to say close the door. If you don't put that in your code won't work. And if you don't put it in your ceremony won't work either. It's the same thing. So especially because the process of starting when you start a ceremony and you're invoking spirit, you're inviting these people to come in. And especially if you go around a circle and you ask what your participants, who do they want to bring in? They may end up bringing in a very large list. You might have 35 different spiritual beings who have been invited to the fire. And so you have to be very clear at the end of the fire that you thank them and you release them so that they can go on and do other things. It would be incredibly rude to invite someone to your house and then never show them the way out or thank them for their attendance. So you shouldn't do that with spirit either. So understand that, these are almost common sense rules, and spirit is your family. It's just like, it could even be your ancestors, right? Literally your family. So your great-great-grandmother, you are not going to be making her sit around waiting for you to remember to let her go home, okay? So you have to have invitation to spirits, clean participants. You might want to offer a song to move things along. That you state your intentions to create the sacred space. That is the opening. Then there is the ask. So the ask is the prayers and requests, gratitudes and respect. There's appreciation. Thank you so much for my life. And sometimes very unexpectedly tremendous tears. It doesn't have to be tears, but tears may arise, and that's okay. It's a very special thing that's happening here, and especially if it's a new experience for you to be in a genuine, real ceremony, it can be a lot of release and relief and joy, tears of joy. Oh my goodness, there is a place for all of this in my life. That can be just a fabulous realization. So then there's the gifting to the spirits. So the foods, the incenses, the special herbs and woods, all those goodies that we talked about. This is the gifting time. Then we have the listening time. You want to feel into the moment. Everyone's done their prayers. We've done the offerings. We've sung. We're here in the fullness of the moment, and we have invited all of this spirit. And here is the time to listen. What do you hear? What do you feel? Is there an owl that came by? Is there some other animal that came by? Is there a message for you there? You have to listen and find out. Maybe there is. That would be nice. It's not required. It doesn't mean it's not a good ceremony if you don't get a message. Just let it be what it is. It's okay. And then the thanking. You feel that shift. You offer gratitudes to spirit. Oops, kitty. Feel that gratitude to spirit and to one another and acknowledge the space. And then here is the time for the closing. So you release the assembled energies. You thank everyone again. You can never have too many thank yous. And end with a song and close it down. So only after the closing and leaving the site where this has happened can mundane life resume. And lots of times this is an excellent moment for a transition to, say, for instance, a potluck with that group of people that you've gathered together. But all that moment should wait until the leader of the ceremony has officially closed it down. Your piece may be done, but the ceremony must close for it to actually be done and for you to be liberated to go chat or, unwrap your brownies or whatever it is that you're going to do. So never leave an unattended fire. Always have safety there, or candle. If you're using a candle, this is now the time to put it out. Or if you're going to let it continue to burn, say, for instance, out in your backyard porch, know that in that area, that sacred space is still open, and act accordingly. So sometimes I've been at burning ball ceremonies where it's not quite as formal as everything I've just laid out, that people have an opportunity to do their own private little wish making, and they burn that up, and they're releasing and they burn that up. And that fire is going on out there with a little candle, for instance, out in a backyard. A bird bath, for instance, might be a good choice. I mean, if you're in a cold place, you're not going to spend a lot of time out there. And then you can have that be like the sanctuary where this fire is. And then when you're ready to close that down, you officially close that down, and always be very careful. So now, what are the kinds of things that you are thinking about in the process of all of this? What are you releasing this year? So the transition from 2022, unbelievable, to 2023, what is it from 2022 you would like to leave behind? I personally had one of the roughest years of my life in 2022. I have a huge list of things I would like to leave behind, a lot of health challenges, among other things. And I want to bring in some beautiful things from 2023. I have great projects that I have been so looking forward to doing. I really need to regain my health so that I can complete those projects. This process right here, right now, this video is one of those projects for me. So we'll see how it all goes. And then the question of, how do you plant those new intentions? So you offer wishes to your fire. And some people, I have seen this offered, I think this is a lovely choice. You can take some of the ashes from the fire. You can share them with everyone, can take some ashes away from the fire. And you can put those like in a little pot with like an amaryllis bulb or crocus bulbs, something like that. And you could put them in there and set that out on your windowsill with those ashes. Certain ashes are good for plants in general. And then when that little planty blossoms and you've got your spring bulbs going, you can really feel the opening up of those wishes. It's a reminder for you carrying on into the next year. And there are all kinds of special seeds that you might find. By the way, libraries often have seed programs where you can get free seeds of all different kinds, sometimes heirlooms, usually really native to your area. You should check that out, what kind of things you can get there. So we will be checking in later in the year as to what animal is coming up for 2023. And say, for instance, the Chinese astrology system, different lunar systems have different New Year's dates, and they're frequently different kinds of names. Like it could be I've seen the year of the flint in an Azteca culture, or the chicken, or rabbits, whatever it may be. So I'll have to look up what 2023 is going to be. But I know that we just had the opening of the year of the cosmic rabbit. A friend of mine attended a Mayan ceremony, and this was the new year of the cosmic rabbit. So may we hop into a beautiful year for 2023. So this is a little bit long. I don't know if it's always going to be this long. Sometimes it'll be shorter. I'm sure it'll get technically better. But I hope you have a lovely new year. I think that you're really well prepared now for how to do your own burning bowl ceremony, and you understand what a ceremony is. And so we'll just continue with laying out how does all of this stuff fit together, because there's actually like a huge kind of recipe book out there, and I have 100 to 120 of these little talks already all laid out from when I led a group in Morro Bay, the Morro Bay Metaphysicians, at the wonderful Coalesce bookstore on Main Street. A shout out to my Coalesce peeps, and much more to come. Thank you so much. Blessings. Be well. Know that you are loved and that things can indeed get better. Aho.